Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today I'm playing a bit of catch up and covering the movement phases and shooting phases that we've had previewed for the Old World. Games Workshop is giving us tidbits along the way of their rules for Fantasy, which is just around the corner in 2024, and today we're going to be looking at how units will be moving and forming, and then how units will be shooting. So let's get into it. Alright, we've already looked at the strategy phase. Let's go down the center so we don't wobble all over the place. It's now time to investigate one of the major mechanics that differentiates this game from any other Warhammer game, its movement system. But before you can move, you need a formation. Let's rank up. So here we've got Close Order, Skirmish, Open Order, which is new and exciting, and Lance Formation, looking like it's only, as it was before, for Bretonnian Knights. So here we have Close Order, which looks pretty familiar, but they talk about Open Order, and let's have a look at that. Skirmish, same, and Lance, but Close Order units, we're all over the place, facing the same direction in order to fight in ranks. Where possible, there must be the same number of models in each rank, with more models in the rank than the file. Now, it's going to be interesting to see the rules around this, because this is as opposed to marching column, where there's more models in the column than rank. Now, if it's equal column and rank, people are saying, well, does that mean I'm both in combat order, close order, I should say, and in marching column? I'm sure you're not. I'm sure they've got rules that stipulate that and explain how that works exactly. But it'll be interesting to see how much people actually want to change formation in this game. A lot of people are worried that you'll be changing formation every turn. I don't think so, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Right, they move and fight as a single entity. Yep, sure, wheeling, charging, blah, blah, blah. Alright, when they need to move rapidly, your units can adopt a marching column, reforming into a shape that's deeper than it is wide. A unit formed in this way may not charge and earns no rank bonus in combat, but it can move at triple speed. Now, the issue, of course, is changing formation will likely cost movement, so people are a little concerned about how much utility marching column will actually have. If it costs you, half of your movement to change formation or whatever that looks like, the bonus here is quite slim and the risks are quite high. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. It is nice to see something like marching column come into the game. I've played quite a few games of Fantasy where I've had units just completely out of the game on a 6x4 table due to circumstances. It'll, I think, add a lot to scenario play and objectives where units can get across the board a little bit quicker, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic for those faster moving units such as cavalry to just absolutely get across the board where they need to be, especially now that charge distances are becoming smaller. Now, it says units with the skirmish special rule do not need to rank up at all so long as each model is within an inch, so that seems pretty similar to what it was before. Was it half an inch before? I can't remember. Either way, similar-ish. Highly maneuverable, yep, sure. They can hit and fade with flank charges, great. Open order is what I'm really interested in. Now, units still fight in ranks, meanwhile, but they're faster, more agile, and handle tough terrain better. So this is a new design space for Games Workshop and for Fantasy Battle. It looks like Open Order will still be ranked up as per formations, but it will allow some design space for different units that are potentially a bit more maneuverable. It'll be interesting to see which units they allow to Open Order. I think it'll be quite a lot. Mostly those kind of non-traditional units, so your human with a sword and shield may not have access to it, or you know what? Maybe everyone will have access to it, and it will just have some downsides along with it. Or maybe it'll be for, elves who don't have shields, for instance, or beastmen might be in Open Order when ranked up. Those more maneuverable, as you would imagine, races and or units. So I'm really excited for Open Order. That sounds great. Close order can become quite frustrating on tables with terrain. Often you see fantasy tables without a lot of terrain because of this, just because it was such a pain in the ass and could create such a disadvantage to any player that had to move into that terrain for whatever reason. I remember moving a unit into a water feature and getting just absolutely smashed because of it. I paid the price on that one. Open order maybe makes board's a little more interesting, gives players a little more options with how they're moving around the board and interacting with terrain. So there we go. We have Close Order, Open Order, Skirmish, Lance. There's combat order, there's marching column. We'll wait and see how that plays out and what formation changes look like. It might be a bit of a pain to keep changing throughout the game. Certainly, you don't want to be changing formation every turn. It takes time and will really slow the game down. But I think marching column will be for those really unique aspects around scenario play, or when one particular unit is just so far out of the game, you need to make some serious movement to make them relevant again. So I don't think we'll be seeing units change every turn. I don't think people need to worry about that, but it's good to have the option so that all units can be where they need to be at some point in the game. Now moving on, the movement phase. Let's see, it's divided into 4 parts, as each of the phases are. The first of these is to declare charges. The target must be visible to your unit, at least partially within the front arc. That sounds similar. Your unit cannot be fleeing, cannot have rallied this turn. So we did, in the previous article, have a hint that maybe units could charge after rallying. That has been quashed, or already engaged in combat. All makes sense. You may, however, pre-measure the distance to your targets. I'm not sure. Could you pre-measure in 8th edition? I'm pretty sure you could. After all this, the inactive player declares charge reactions. Most units may hold to receive the charge, stand and shoot if they have missile weapons, and are further away than the charging unit's movement characteristic. That's all similar. Or flee by pivoting around 180 degrees and trying to escape. That's all the same. If you're caught, however, you'll be run down and destroyed. Devastating. Beyond that, some especially alert units may countercharge, another new thing we're seeing here. So plenty of units that it just didn't make sense for them to sit still and take a charge, especially those more combat-oriented units, those that are, filled with berserk rage or have particularly quick reflexes. Why are they just standing still and letting some dwarves charge into them? So countercharge sounds really interesting to me. It means that you won't be, I think, as concerned with particular units about being charged, and that you'll, which I think is good, because the 1d6 essentially movement. Yeah, there we go. So it's movement plus the better of 2d6. So it's a much smaller range, which means units are going to be getting a lot closer and it's a lot riskier. So that may have moved towards more shooting orientated armies, but with countercharge, I think you'd be happy to take those kind of assault units and be able to get the advantage out of them even with those smaller charge ranges. So very interesting. Once again, good to see Games Workshop trying some new things and keeping the base of the game, but making it a little fresh and bring out some new interesting ideas. Now, the second step is to actually make your charge moves. That looks all the same to me. Swift Stride, there we go, for cavalry by the look of it, adds an extra d6 to every charge they make. That's good, as it should. So cavalry will be charging a lot further. It sounds like cavalry are going to be super relevant in this game. Heavy cavalry, in particular, in 8th edition, didn't really work, just because they were so vulnerable to certain shooting units. But it sounds like they'll be coming back and doing some amazing work in the old world. Now, if you're in range, accounting for wheeling, having to spend for wheeling in a charge hurts, but it is what it is. Move the charging unit into base contact with its target, bringing the maximum number of models from both sides into combat. If you whiff the roll, however, the charge has failed. They must move the full distance rolled. I wonder if that means the 2d6. It doesn't. It probably just means the higher of 1d6 towards its target. But you'll... Maybe not, though. We'll wait and see. But your warriors haven't got the impetus to complete the charge, and they're now ripe to be hit back next turn. Look at that artwork. Just utter perfection. This is why we love fantasy. Now, the third step accounts for compulsory moves. This is mostly to accommodate fleeing units that failed to rally, but it includes other rare moves such as random movement for Night Goblin fanatics or Stone Trolls who have failed their stupidity test. Oh man, those stupidity tests have hurt me. And look, so have my Night Goblin fanatics. Just the joys of playing an Orc and Goblin army. The fourth step covers the remaining moves, regular maneuvers that don't result in combat. So just moving around. Now, the mechanics of movement. You've got wheeling. That's pretty similar. You've got moving and marching. Let's see, is there anything new here? In the first case, they may move up to their movement characteristic and then may shoot later in the turn. If you're marching, they move double their pace, same as before, but they sacrifice their ability to perform any maneuver more complex than a wheel and their ability to shoot this turn for speed. All pretty familiar stuff. Nothing too controversial there. Wonderful. Now, a unit may wheel, in which the unit pivots from one of the front corners. You may also turn all the unit's models 90 or 180 degrees, spending a quarter of your movement for each 90-degree turn. Move backwards or sideways at half pace. All pretty similar. I think the turning mechanic is new. From memory, it used to be that you took a leadership test, or whatever they called it, and you could reform and then move as normal. But I guess the turn takes away that risk of failing that leadership check and just takes up a quarter of your movement, which for a lot of units isn't very much at all. You got readjust the ranks or reforming. So similar kind of stuff. That's the movement. The interesting pieces there are very much the open order and the countercharge. So we'll see how those play out. I can't wait to find out, and I think that'll add a lot of interest to the game and a lot of diversity between units that is very welcome. Now let's get into the shooting. So this is where things get pretty interesting. And by interesting, look, it's all pretty similar. Okay? Love me some shooting in fantasy, but it never really felt like it had the impact that you wanted it to, depending on what you were shooting. Certainly certain war machines could do amazing work, but I always found that kind of units with rifles or bows or crossbows, they didn't do a lot, and I don't think that's going to change too much. Now, let's see. It's broken into 4 phases or 4 steps, because of course it is. Declare targets, roll to hit, roll to wound, and remove casualties. So nothing different. They've just really been deliberate with how they've spaced out the phases, which I think will help them write the rules, make them a lot simpler to understand, and be very, very sure in the mechanics of the game, and add interesting mechanics in at certain steps. Now, everyone and everything shoots in this phase, whether they're lowly peasant bowmen and barbarian javelineers? Interesting. A macabre Kemrian screaming skull catapult, or an elven high mage manifesting a fiery convocation. So many big words there, and it is early in the morning. Now, the longbow, it seems to have gained armor bane, which is nice. Bows really struggled in 8th edition. They didn't do a lot at all unless you started beefing them up with magic, so still strength 3 there, but armor bane 1 is nice and makes a lot of sense. Screaming Skull Catapult. Now, I don't know if this has gone up in strength. Was it strength 3 or was it always strength 4? I can't remember. I'm not going to go and check. But essentially, it would be great to see stone throwers going up to strength 4 across the bat. It means they would be more used to take out massed infantry, as opposed to what they were used for in 8th edition, which was sniping out enemy war machines, essentially a counter battery fire situation. Now, they come with the bombardment rule, which I don't think it really explains it. Let's just check. I don't think so. I'll just scroll down. No, but the bombardment, I imagine, has to do with the fact that you can shoot over units or over terrain, which is nice. The cumbersome probably has something to do with not being able... Oh no, it's got move or shoot. The cumbersome. Interesting. We'll see what that comes down to. Flaming attacks, magical attacks, all the things you would expect from a Screaming Skull Catapult. The multiple wounds, I believe, is only to the single model. Yep, where the base lies underneath the central hull of the blast template. There we go. D3 plus 1 makes a lot of sense. Good to see a bit of consistency there instead of just D3. Oh, and it's got Screaming Skulls. Fabulous. It does have a minimum range there of 12, which is nice, and a nice big maximum range. Now, to shoot, it's pretty familiar. Hasn't marched or charged, that makes sense. Isn't fleeing or in combat. Must have line of sight. Can't split fire. All same kind of stuff. Models can almost always shoot only once. Very good, no matter how many attacks they have in their profile, unless they have the volley fire special rule. Or are stationed on a hill, only the front rank may fire. Now, this is different. In 8th edition, you could fire in 2 ranks. It was different in previous editions. Was it 6th, where you could only fire in 1 rank? I remember when I got my dwarves, I found them in the basement of an older player that had since stopped playing the game. He had some amazing trays that were kind of 10 wide for the dwarven riflemen. What are they called? I can't remember right now, but essentially you'd put 10 dwarfs along in a long thin line, and that's how you'd shoot. I don't love that. I don't love seeing that. I don't love encouraging that. I don't know how I feel about only the front rank being able to fire for anything that isn't volley fire, but what it does do is, I guess, reduce the efficacy of crossbows and black powder weapons, essentially, which I don't know if they were overpowered in 8th, but certainly you definitely saw them taken over units with bows, which I imagine will have volley fire. Is it in the... Yeah, there you go, volley fire for the longbow. So I think bows will become a lot more popular than they were, which is good to see. And from a mechanics piece, it makes sense. I guess, like with rifles and crossbows, the front rank could take a knee. I don't know if it needs to just be one front rank, but it makes hills a lot more interesting as well. So once again, yeah, it means terrain will have a much bigger impact on this game, and certainly I will be looking at including hills in most of my boards. Now, once a target has been chosen, it's time to roll to hit. Here's the big news. Old Style Ballistic Skill is back. Of course it is. Not surprised at all. Being a Heresy player and moving back to those 7th edition rules, as it were, kind of from old school 40k. We know how to use Ballistic Skill, people, and we've been doing this for years. So very similar Ballistic Skill rules. That's all talking about how Ballistic Skill works, which is for those Age of Sigmar players that never played older games, and 40k players, I guess too. They don't have Ballistic Skill anymore. Now, there is a toughness cap, which is nice to see. So a strength 3 bow, which is, I imagine most bows, are not going to be able to wound toughness 9 creatures. It'll be interesting to see how many creatures go up to toughness 9. I have had my giant taken down by bows before, which is just so frustrating. And it'll be interesting to see if things like giants do go up to toughness 9, or if it's just the bigger, scarier monsters than that, your dragons or whatnot. Wait and see what gets toughness 9, but that will definitely make a huge difference to monsters and monsters creatures, which in 8th edition just went down a little too easy, mostly because of cannons, more so than strength 3 weapons. But still it's something. Give them something, right? It will be fascinating, and I think actually a lot of the shooting phase and how powerful shooting armies are will revolve around how cannons work in the next edition. We don't find out here, but I can't wait to see, because I don't want them to be the monster snipers that they were. Now, it wouldn't be Warhammer without a saving throw. This all sounds familiar. Light armor 6+, heavy armor 5+, boosted with a shield, barded mount, certain spells and magical items. That all sounds very familiar. There is a small difference, however, as models can also have a ward save. That's the same as old school fantasies as well, and is rolled for as a separate save made after the armor roll has failed. Believe the mechanics are just the same there. They didn't mention being mounted in general increasing your save, so I'm hoping it doesn't, because mounted units could often get to a 3+ or 2+ save pretty quickly. And that was a bit much. 2+ save Chaos Knights, it's just a bit much. So a barded mount makes a lot more sense than simply being on a horse, increasing your armor save. Now, the final step is to remove casualties and take panic tests. Super simple. Wound, take a wound, remove model, unless you have more wounds, of course. You need to take a panic test if the shooting has killed more than a quarter of the models. Yep, I'll get to that in another article. All sounds pretty familiar. So not a huge deviation from 8th edition fantasy. Little bits and pieces are just changing around the edges, just to make it a little more balanced, hopefully. Now, big beasties have breath weapons. Some skirmish cavalry can fire and flee, while dwarven iron drakes, their cinder blast bombs, have quickshot. That's cool. Wouldn't you like to know? I would like to know what quickshot does. I imagine quickshot has something to do with being able to fire them at charging units more easily, or maybe being able to throw them. I don't think throwing them twice in a shooting phase and having 2 shooting attacks, because that wouldn't make sense with bombs. So yeah, I dare say it's when you're getting charged, you don't take a penalty to being able to hit for that roll, because they do talk about that in a minute. Or if they already talked about it, they've already talked about it. So you do take penalties to shooting for all the usual things. Yep, here we go. The modifiers, -1 to hit if you've moved, you're at long range, you're receiving a charge, or if the target has partial cover. Very similar to all the way it used to work. Now, this is interesting, the magic missile. So we've got the fireball here, and we've got the vortex of chaos. Now, the fireball looks pretty familiar. Was it strength 3 before? I don't think so. I think it was always strength 4. Flaming attacks makes sense. And the vortex of chaos. Now, vortexes were an absolute bane on 8th edition. They were too powerful. My dark elf one in particular from memory was just absolutely cruel. You'd fly your sorcerer up the flank and just unleash a nasty vortex down their army and just win the game. Just boom, that's how you won the game. But this Vortex of Chaos, it's really quite I wouldn't say underwhelming, but we're talking about strength 3 hits. We're talking about d6 plus 1. It's only going 15 inches away from the caster when they put it down. It's a small blast instead of big. It's moving d6 inches in a random direction during the start of every turn subphase. Yep, that's fine. So it's not overpowered in any way, I think, for this Vortex. It'll be interesting to see if we do get more powerful Vortexes. We probably will, I'm sure, but this is at least a good start for what we would like to see out of a Vortex. Something that's meaningful, but not just decimating entire armies in one magic phase. And that's all I wanted to speak about today. So we've had the movement phase, we've had the shooting phase. The next phase, I believe, will be... I don't know. Is it the combat phase up next, or is there something in between? Wait and see. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of these new rules. If there's anything here that is of interest to you, and if you're happy to see that they're pretty much staying the same as 8th edition is the main kind of gist with little changes here and there. Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting fired up for fantasy, which is much better than frothing for fantasy. So thank you to, I think it was Chalky on YouTube, recommending Fired Up for Fantasy. We're gonna go with that from now on. Thank you.